Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. We are talking grammar on this episode, teaching, literacy, all the things. Delighted to be talking with educator and author Patty McGee. Patty, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Glad to have you. I am noticing the book over your shoulder there on the shelf. This is
hmm
not your granny's grammar. And even
hmm
closer there. Yeah.
Yeah,
And an innovative approach to meaningful and engaging grammar instruction.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, delighted to be talking the world of grammar. It's not something that I get to talk about very often beyond the classroom, so glad to do that. And by means of an origins question, I'm curious about your path as an educator and as an author.
Sure. It's pretty unconventional as an educator. I grew up in a little town in northern New Jersey, and I went to the school there, and that was the first job that I had out of college, um, where my first grade teacher was my principal.
Hmm.
So she taught me how to read, and she even had a photo of me. Because in the 70s, you have a couch and a classroom library. It was really progressive. But there I was sitting on the couch reading a book from the classroom library. And it was a wonderful experience. I then became a school librarian, but I moved schools to the school that my kids went to. It's only like 2 miles away, but it was just a move that I thought would be really family friendly. And with that, I became an instructional coach, and then I moved to be a staff developer. I don't know if I like that term, but that was the title. Um, More recently. And then I became a consultant, but I prefer to call myself a traveling teacher. Um, I overheard a second grader talk to her grandpa as we were walking out of school. She pointed to me and she said, Grandpa, that lady's not a stranger. She's a traveling teacher, which means she comes, yeah, it was so cute. She comes to make teachers' jobs just a little bit easier. And sometimes she teaches us. And I thought that was the perfect description of what I do now. So I still have uh, time in the classroom, teaching, demoing, that sort of thing. And so all the things that I write about are things that I'm passionate in terms of either problems of practice for me, um, or challenges that we've addressed together in a school. Excuse
Very nice, very nice. I think that
me.
belongs
Yeah.
on like the business card, the traveling teacher
Yes.
comment, and yeah, that's
I think you're
lovely.
right. I love it.
Love it. Um, well, I am a teacher as well, and I'm curious
Mm,
about some of the uh, maybe the issues that you've noticed, or some of just the trends that you've noticed in teaching work, and how you've changed your work as an educator as a result.
yeah. There were many things that I did to really evolve my instruction in many places over the years. It's been about 31 years that I've been an educator, so I've seen a lot and I've studied a lot. And uh, the first problem of practice that I noticed I had was that I was giving feedback to my students, um, and their writing by correcting their writing with well, maybe I didn't use a red pen all the time. I thought maybe a purple pen was more friendly in correcting. But I thought to myself, there has to be a better way because I didn't find correcting to be something effective, meaning
Mhm.
like students didn't look at the corrections and then ponder. them to think, wow, how might I do this differently the next time so I can avoid this correction? And then if they weren't sure, coming to me to find out the strategies that might be most useful to learn how not to do that again. And then going on to the next correction and doing the same thing. So it really wasn't a sound practice. And so my first area of evolution um, was really to look at what are the possibilities of response to student writing that are not correction, but also not fluff, because I thought it was one or the other. It was either going to be correction or this is great, keep on being great, just keep writing and being great. Like it wasn't concrete enough either. And so that was my first exploration and my first in probably 10 years later, my first book, where I talk about methods and model through video. Some methods, I shouldn't say model, demo, because it's not an exemplar, it's just an example of me working with students, giving them feedback that's concise, actionable, but also based on strengths and thinking about feedback as next steps as well. So that was where I really evolved as an educator. And then I had another book on just some teaching writing methods that I think were just important to put out there because there are a lot of writing programs, but the instructional practices that must either be the underpinning of programs or be something that we prioritize alongside these programs were just so necessary. I mean, research based. I saw you. Am I correct on this? That you had Stephen Graham on at one point?
Stephen Graham.
I could be mixing him up with another podcast that I listened to, but he was my inspiration because he and his wife, Karen Harris, have decades deep worth of writing research and teaching the teaching of writing research. And with that, I really wanted to make something concise and digestible so that
Mhm,
anyone who is teaching writing has an alternative to what has been the ubiquitous kind of approach of sign and assess, or some people say assign and autopsy. And
mhm,
there's nothing we can quite do once we get to the end, and that's your grade, and we're done. So I wanted to put together a book that would teach us methods that probably most colleges, teacher schools did not show us. And then the curiosity around grammar instruction became a focus for me early on because with all the efforts I was putting into becoming a stronger teacher, there was the black hole of grammar instruction that
mhm,
just took hold whenever we picked up that workbook that was provided to me, where kids were either identifying parts of speech or filling in the blanks of a word, or and I found it both ineffective but also just something that I didn't know any different. That's how I learned grammar. And I know it was with the best of intentions for my teachers too. Like that was
mhm,
probably how they learned grammar and their grandparents learned grammar. But that only really works for a small percentage of people because most teachers feel a great discomfort around the teaching of grammar. And I've done some anecdotal research myself to find out why. And the two biggest reasons were one, because they felt like they didn't understand grammar, which kind
mhm,
of like points a finger at these old practices. I would say some people, a small percentage of people learned grammar with those methods, but the majority of educators do not, self-identified. And they also really wanted to have some alternatives to the memorization worksheet approach. And
Mhm.
so I wanted that too. So I went on a 30-year kind of journey, I guess, of just trying to uncover and create and test and then make public the sorts of things that we can do to be effective grammar instructors.
Yeah, yeah. As you were mentioning there, I too went through school and I did lots of worksheets. I then found myself
Mhm.
assigning worksheets, and
Mhm.
there is that endless kind of cycle of uh, that approach. I love what you're saying there about writing. Writing is something that I love to do. I'm passionate
Mhm.
about it, and I'm always interested in including writing in the classroom across content
Mhm.
areas, which is
Mhm.
another aspect of your work that I appreciate is that these are concepts that not only appear in English classes or
Mhm.
literature classes, but carry across. Anything that you'd like to say about the power of writing instruction for students?
Wow. Well, done with particular characteristics in place, it can change the trajectory of a student's life.
Hmm.
And I'm
Hmm.
talking both academically and personally, and obviously professionally. And when we know a process, we can always adapt the process, but a process is important. This is all coming again from Stephen Graham. Time to write, feedback throughout the process, goals that we're working toward in our writing, and not just for the audience who would be reading it, but for ourselves as skill improvement. And then feedback, not correction, but feedback from peers where they talk about their writing with all of those things in place, which are quite simple, uh, pretty much free, and very powerful. With those in place, writers develop their own voice. They learn how to adjust their writing for their audience. They learn that writing is both outward, where there's someone who will read it and we want them to think, know, or believe something, and also inward, where we find a type of art that is with words
Hmm.
that simply improves our quality of life as people in whatever we pursue.
I love that idea of feedback throughout the process. And I'm currently at the end of a semester with students. So just noting what you were saying about the assign and autopsy approach. And I
Mhm.
still have that moment inside me where I'm like, should I be marking everything? That was
Yeah,
certainly done to me. But I love the idea of feedback versus correction.
yeah. I want to say, still in my head, when I look at student writing, I see things I want to correct. I call myself a recovering corrector because the urge is still there. It hasn't gone away. It's diminished a little bit with practice over like 15, 20 years of trying new things. Um, but because it's been done to us mostly, that's the
Mhm.
main form of feedback that we received. It's hard to purge that, but there's always ways to rethink how we respond. Can I share a
Yep.
metaphor with you? That's one of my favorites.
Please do. Please do.
So, my father was years ago very curious in learning how to crochet. And my Aunt Helen, his sister in law, is and was an expert crocheter. Like, I don't even think she remembers learning how to crochet. She was so young. And when my father would be making his blankets, which was his only genre, um, he would work a little bit. And then my Aunt Helen would come and sit side by side with him and look at the blanket. And my father was usually pretty self deprecating, like, oh, look at the shape of this blanket. It looks like Tennessee. And she would always respond with, yes, but look at this area right here. This part's strong. And then she would look at him and think, I'm not here to fix this blanket. I'm here to teach him to be a crocheter. What would be the next thing I would show him to teach him a skill that builds his crocheting self? And she would decide on that. And then she also brought her own crocheting materials. And she would say, all right, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to teach you one way to fix holes in your blanket. A blanket can be crooked, and that's fine. And we'll work on the crookedness at another time. But right now, because you know how to stitch because you counted like that, that's going to really help with your holes in your blanket. And then she would model how to do that. And she would give steps on how to do that. And then my father would try, and she would either continue to model or give him tips by coaching, like, oh, not another loop, this way. And I have a beautiful photo of my father from a few years ago, standing in his kitchen, holding a blanket that was big and completed and symmetrical and with holes only where they belonged. And he had done that by himself. And I looked at that relationship and I thought to myself, I can do that.
Yeah.
That's an approach I can take when I respond to student writing. That we're looking for progress. I'm here to teach you to be a stronger writer, and we will go step by step, bit by bit, in how we do that.
Love it. Love it. I love that metaphor. And that's somewhat freeing as a teacher too,
Mhm.
because correcting everything takes a very long time. It's exhausting work. And then to
It
think
is,
about the effectiveness of the approach, it's even more exhausting from that perspective.
yes, does not have the return on investment that we are
Hmm.
putting in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know the book is published by Corwin, and I always like to
Mhm.
mention places where people can go, additional resources. Any resources that you'd like to share with listeners?
Yes. So the metaphor I just shared about how we can respond to student writing, that would really be with my first book with Corwin, and that's feedback that moves writers forward. My grammar approach, which I would say is born from the lineage of that book, is Not Your Granny's Grammar. And you can find them in the regular places on the Corman website, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, but also my website. And my website has a ton of resources that complement this work or abbreviate the work to digest in small doses. And my website is pattymcgee.org. And just make sure you spell Patty with a Y, because if you Google Patty with an I, you're going to get a famous skateboarder from the 60s. And that's not me.
Oh,
She could skateboard on her hands. I definitely can't. So we definitely want to look for Patty with a Y or just even Patty McGee literacy, and it will bring you right to my website.
very nice, very nice. I think the skating with your hands, I think that might be next. I think that's a
Ah,
goal, right?
I think that's too far of a reach at the moment. I have to start
Uh,
with my feet first.
yes, well, this is true. This is true. Scaffolding is important. This is true.
Yeah.
Uh, I was going to ask about what's next, if that feels like an appropriate spot to mention the next blanket. Still appreciating that metaphor.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, what's next for me? I have a couple of things in mind. Um, One is creating some inexpensive and highly accessible courses for teachers to work with some of these grammar concepts and customize them for their own setting. I'm also thinking about grammar manipulatives, which
Mm,
is a concept that's in the book, but I think can be greatly expanded because they can be things that we just print and cut and then use. And I've seen a whole lot of love for grammar coming out of kids when they have things like manipulatives in order
oh
to
yeah,
play with concepts.
yeah, yeah. I had currently I teach high school. I've done middle school and college. I had a student telling me yesterday how much she appreciated online or not online learning, hands-on learning,
Mm-hmm.
and showing me examples of a program that she wanted to get into that was very hands-on. So that idea of
Wow,
manipulatives is powerful.
it is. It is. And what a wonderful thing to hear from a student. It's
Right,
very
right. That
validating. Please write that down so you can look back at it because sometimes we forget these things and how much value we bring to students' lives. So I know this is your podcast, but I am saying that I think you should have maybe what's called a smile file and write down
I
notes
like it.
that students or parents or anyone have said to you that can remind you of the impacts that you've had.
And that's why you're here on the podcast. I appreciate that so much.